He is a rock star. Inbar, I'll give you the mic in a second. He is a rock star, and he's going to show, I'll take care of this stuff.
You take care of
You
it.
have a drink.
I have a drink.
You go have a drink, talk to these guys. While we get set up,
The first thing I'm
here
going
are
to
some
do.
B-side stickers, so incoming. Watch out.
First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell everyone that in Tel Aviv, B-sides, the B stands for beach. And therefore...
Like this? Woo! We have more, we have more. Therefore, do it there in front of the room, not in front of the flower pots. כל הכבוד. כל הכבוד. Yeah, that's Inbar Raz, ladies and gentlemen. You ready for the beach? Do you need your badge for the beach?
No.
You want to keep it?
But I need my presentation.
I will get your presentation.
Or I will stop.
Anybody want stickers? You want some stickers? Okay, woo! Some more. I'm not gonna throw shot glasses of whiskey at you. All right. And Inbar, if you step away from the podium.
That's what she said.
Yes, that is what she said. I don't know how many ladies you meet at podiums, but this year I'm also proud to tell you that we have more ladies than ever before, which is also very exciting. Thank you very much, ladies, for coming. That's for you. I'll put it up for you in a second. And, let's finish this show.
Are you having fun as much as I am?
Woo! You sure do. We could all use a drink.
All right.
What do you need? Thank you.
So, while Karen is putting a
Right
microphone on me,
Yes.
my lovely assistant.
No, I'm your assistant. I got upgraded.
Yes.
Okay.
So, I'm going to be talking about ethical hacking, or actually why it is important.
Can we do a sound test? Ask them if they can hear.
Why it is important for us at B-sides. This is who I am. Usually people waste 5 minutes of their time. Just look at that. I'm going to count to 5, and I'm going to switch it. That's what I did. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Got any questions? Ask me later. Ethical hacking. When do you need ethical hacking? A lot of people look for vulnerabilities, but you have to know when you cross the line. This is something that I borrowed from a professor in the University of Amsterdam who teaches ethical hacking. And he created this traffic light protocols that tells you when you need to start worrying. Green light says no ethical consideration involved. For example, you take an open source product and you reverse it or read it at your own convenience at home. Or you have an offline copy of a database. You can do whatever you want, no one gets hurt. The next stage is when you have contact with personal information. This is now the buzzword, PII, personally identifiable information. This is something that starts to cross the line. It means that if you touch it, then you're breaching somebody else's privacy. And this is where you need to start following some rules, which I'll be talking about. The next stage is when you make it into large quantities of data. Sometimes it can be credit card numbers, social security numbers, other sensitive, maybe medical information. This is very sensitive. And the last category is very special. These are projects that literally cross the line. Borderline illegal, sometimes maybe illegal. But they are so important to do that sometimes you take the risk, okay? I don't want to give any examples because it's very individual, but there are some categories, and if you ever go there, you're pretty much on your own. But when you do responsible disclosure, which is the act of finding a vulnerability and then reporting it to the vendor before going public, there are basically 3 stages. The act of finding the vulnerability, the act of reporting it to the vendor, and the act of going public. And in each one of these 3 stages, there are a few questions that you need to ask yourself, and the answer will determine whether you are doing it right by the book, when the ulterior thing should be do no harm. So let's talk about finding the vulnerability. How do you find the vulnerability? Is it a deliberate search or is it accidental? Did you just browse and thought, hey, what happens if I change this URL? What happens? Or maybe you were using a product and an error message happened and you're like, oh, this is interesting, I want to look into that. Sometimes it makes a difference. Are you using specific tools? Because if you're using Kali or some other tool set for hacking, then it shows who you are and your intentions. But if you're just playing around, if you're just changing stuff in the URL, it looks different. You need to think about the bigger picture, what it looks like. Data access and extraction. If you touch the data, do you take any of it out? Do you need to? What is more important, the act of showing that you touch the data? This is the correct answer. If you need to extract data, do it once, do it twice, do it at the minimum amount that shows that it can be done, but you're not breaching somebody else's privacy. In fact, if you're hacking a system that you are a member of, extract your own information. That way you will have shown that you can access data and extract it, but you didn't breach anybody's privacy or ask for permission from somebody else whose data is in the system. Damage infliction. Sometimes, even though you try not to, you cause damage. You need to think about that beforehand. What could go wrong? Because that means you have inflicted damage. Sir? Dude, would you mind sitting on the chair and clearing that? Thank you. Next, the victim's point of view. You know what you're doing, you know what your intentions are, but the guy whose system you're working on is having a different view of the things. Try to think of what it looks like on their side, because sometimes you will realize that even though your intentions are good, it looks very different on the other side. So you found the vulnerability, you exploited it, and now it's time to report. Remember, we do that to make the world a better place. I know it sounds cheesy, but if it's not why you're doing that, then don't do it. Okay, we do that because there are problems out there that are not being fixed, and they are being abused by criminals to hurt other people. So we are there to make the world a better place, and therefore we report it. So how quickly do you report it? Let's say that I've got into a remote code execution stage on a website. Do I sit on it for a while? Do I let them know right away? If it's a 0 day on Windows, do I sit on it? Do I let them know right away? The timing between the discovery and the reporting is crucial. Who do you report to? Because it's very easy, and I will show an example, to report it to someone who's not important, then it gets lost. Did you contact someone who makes a difference? Did you contact someone who will fix it? Because you can't say, I reported, but you send it to the web admin address that you got off the DNS records. That's not good enough. What language are you using? You need to be peaceful. Don't say, hey, you have a vulnerability, you're hurting my parents, you better fix that. That's offensive. You need to speak in peace. You say, hi, I found something, I suspect it's a vulnerability. Please take a look. I'd like to help you with that if you need. Because if you use the wrong language, you come off as offensive. Neutrality, no sales pitch. If you work in a company and you sell products that solve that problem, never offer them. That, whether you like it or not, in some countries is considered extortion, right? Because we all know the other example, when a guy walks into your store and says, hi, there's been a bunch of robberies here. I think you need guarding services. I offer them. Would you consider? Don't do that. In fact, it's always off by one. I find a vulnerability in Minnie's system, I report it to him, and then when I talk to the next guy, then I say, I found somebody else's vulnerability, and I solved it. Okay, it's always off by one. Never do it together. And there's a question of whether you mentioned that you're going to publish it or not. Sometimes, if you mention that you publish it, then it makes the other side realize that they have to act on it, because this is why we do that. This is why we go public. It is twisting the arm of the vendor to fix it, because otherwise they could care less. But sometimes if you tell them you're going to go public, then you get a letter of a lawyer, and all of a sudden things become a lot more complicated. So you need to think about that. I don't have clear answers, but these are questions you need to ask yourselves. And then it's time to go public. You reported the vulnerability, the vendor took their time, whether they fix it or not, and now you want to go public. How do you do that? What is the timing? Do you wait for a patch or not? If you gave them 45 days, which is fair enough, and they still didn't patch it, do you still go public or not? Where do you do that? Is it on your blog post? How many people read that? Do you go public in a conference? Do you, push it out through news agencies? There's a huge difference between writing a Twitter or some blog post that has 10,000 people watching that. It's not the same exposure. What level of detail do you give? Try to never give proof of concept. The proof of concept is a loaded weapon. If not everybody who is using the vulnerable system has upgraded, they're going to get vulnerable, and somebody's going to use that. That's going to find its way into Metasploit within hours. And credit. Sometimes many people do that for the credit, okay? Because sometimes the person to publish that is actually the vendor. Do you fight for your credit? Do you fight for Maybe a bug bounty? I don't know. It's a good question. It depends on the situation. And the vendor response. When you go public, do you include the vendor response? To be honest, I reported, this is what they say. Is it embarrassing to them or not? These are things to consider. And when things go wrong, people freak out. And this is a bunch of stuff that happened in the US. Okay? When the system freaks out, weird things start to happen. An eighth grader charged with felony because he changed the screensaver or the background on his teacher's computer. Okay? Because sometimes when the system is not sure what you're trying to do, they freak out. Okay? And of course, there is the very sad case of a guy that actually committed suicide because of the pressure he was put into after discovering a vulnerability. And I know what you're all saying. It won't happen to me. But guess what? It will. And how do we know that?
We're lucky to have Chris with us here in Tel Aviv. We're lucky because a few airlines didn't want him to come to Tel Aviv. So it was a little tricky, and we're so happy he made it. Thanks to the Tel Aviv University team for making it possible.
Absolutely,
So, and I'm going to give you my own personal experience. Who knows this taxi service? All right, so I fly a lot, and I book my taxis to the airport with their system. So how does it work? There's an empty form. You fill it by putting in your phone number. If you've already booked once, then it immediately extracts your address. And I'm like, whoa, this is cool. So, we planned ethical hacking. We wrote a framework. We have a document called Ethical Framework for penetration testing or for vulnerability to make sure we think about everything, all those questions that I mentioned before. And we wrote the script that probes the server at a low rate of 12 queries per second just to make sure it's okay. And we ran it, and we executed the script. And just to show you how much we care about privacy, every address we got, we converted into a pin on a Google map. And then we disposed of the address. And once the map was ready, we took a screenshot of the map and disposed of the map. We no longer had that information. We only kept it for a fraction of a second to make it a picture, and then we threw it away. We don't have any of that information. And then the servers start responding. So what do? You immediately report. So I called the taxi service. We created a disclosure with all the information, and we reported it, and nothing happened. So it turns out, the following week, I gave them a phone call. I said, guys, there's a problem there, and we sent you a vulnerability report. What's up with that? And it turns out they don't know about security. It actually turns out that there's a third party that does all that. That dialogue was actually operated by a remote server belonging to a different company.
Are you trying to tell us that the taxi station don't know about security?
I'm alleging. So we updated the disclosure. It turns out that the same engine serves 10 different taxi stations, covering the entire country from Kiryat Shmona to Eilat. So the same vulnerability affects 10 different customer databases. And we contacted that third party, and then all hell broke loose. The guy is on the phone in his car saying, I'm on my way to the police. My lawyer has already been informed. He was convinced that we hacked him on purpose. Why? Because it was a 3-day period between the crashing of the server and the report to him. But we didn't know. So I had to have my CEO talk to him and tell him and prove to him that we reported within hours to who we thought it was relevant to, right? And at the end, we relaxed. Now, why is it important to us? What? I'm just saying thank you for not being blocked from that service. They still accept my phone number. Now, why is it important here? Because some of the talks here are about hacking. You're going to be listening to people telling you about stuff they did, stuff they discovered, and the way they did that. And what I want you to do is think about it and draw your conclusions. Because you will learn things here, and you need to know how to use them carefully. Because you have to stay within the lines Because every time you break the lines, it's not just you running the risk. You're taming the entire community. You're making it harder for everybody else to do the responsible thing. So it's very important. We're sharing information here. Remember that. And when you pass it on to others, do the same. Mention ethical hacking. Mention why it's important to do it right. This presentation is going to be available if you need it. These are the rules. I didn't invent them. I just put them together. This is how I look at it. I hope you use it. And
let's be careful out.